My name is Sellers, and I am or was the Carroll class of 1977. Um, and I think everything I can tell you today about my career as an environmental engineer did not exist in 1977, didn't exist when I was applying to colleges or waiting back from them. But it's been a fascinating career. I have degrees in chemistry and environmental engineering. I'm a registered professional engineer, professional credential. I have worked for the Environmental Protection Agency. I've worked in consulting firms, and I've been an adjunct teaching what I do for a living. And I've sort of done a lot of different things along that have given me a passion both for the practice of environmental engineering. To see, we got 4 women here, encouraging other women to enter engineering. I think it's a job that gives steady work and good pay, and too many women think it's not a so that's sort of my starting point to talk to you today. I'm curious what brought you here. Are you thinking about a career in environmental engineering? Got some questions?
I'm considering engineering. I'm more leaning toward civil.
There's a lot of overlap between civil engineering and environmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about environmental science.
The cousin of environmental, a little less quantitative. Yeah.
I'm thinking about environmental science also, or physics, but engineering's interesting to me as well.
I'm majoring, or I'm gonna major in biochemistry with like a pre-med track, but biochemistry is pretty open, so I thought I'd listen in. See.
Okay. Nice. Nice. So you've all got some ideas in mind. So what would be most to you? Do you have specific questions, or would you like me to just sort of launch into a description of environmental engineering and careers in environmental engineering? All right. So if I did this right, you should see a presentation in PowerPoint. Holler if you can't see it. Okay. So the first thing I have to start off with is I'm to you today as a Carroll alumni. I'm not speaking on behalf of either of my employers, a consulting firm ERM or Harvard University. So this is just me. I think when I'm out and about, when I talk to my kids' friends, a lot of people don't know what environmental engineering is or what we do. And we are problem solvers who help to protect our planet. We work in the areas of water, whether that's drinking water or wastewater treatment. We work in clean air. A lot of the air pollution engineering is done by chemical engineers, but environmental engineers too. We work to help prevent or mitigate change. We clean up hazardous waste sites, which is one of the things that I did for many years. And we work in product stewardship and sustainability. So that's a bit of jargon for you about helping companies bring products to market safely, sustainably, and in compliance with global regulations. So that's a lot of what I'm doing now is I work with companies to help them to make their products more sustainably. They're associated with lower carbon emissions and use less toxic chemicals. A pretty broad range of activities and interests, applications for environmental engineering. It's even more broad than that because environmental engineers work in a lot of different settings. They work in government, whether that's the U.S. Environmental Agency, it's state agencies, or even local. You know, in data, there are environmental engineers working at water treatment plants or wastewater. Environmental engineers work at non-governmental organizations or NGOs. So they do environmental advocacy, looking at and analyzing data, policy positions, and trying to influence regulators sometimes. Engineers work in industry, helping companies to tend to their or make their products more sustainable. And then some like me work in consulting. Bumped into anybody who works for a consulting firm before. We're basically problem solvers for hire. And a company or sometimes a government agency gets into something and needs some specialized expertise, there is to come in and work with them to analyze the problem, break it down, and then try to work with them to solve. So it's a pretty broad discipline, and it's a pretty new discipline. Grew up out of, I guess it started probably in sanitary engineering 100 years ago, but this breadth of practice has really evolved in the last. So it's a fairly new and pretty growing domain. There are jobs. I think that's one of the questions that most people have when they are thinking about a career. There's expected job growth of 7% in the next. The table at the bottom of the page includes some information about, I don't know about you, but when I was thinking about college and thinking about a career, I wanted to make sure I would make a decent living. So environmental engineers do, in fact, make a pretty good living. Not the best paying form of engineering, but pretty well. So I've had a zigzagging path to be where I am. And I think most of the people that I know had a zigzagging path, regardless of what it is that they do for a living. So I graduated from Carroll in 1977. I was 16 years old. I had no idea what to do. Wasn't even sure what school I wanted to go to. I was pretty clueless. I really liked my chemistry class with Mr. Sens. So I thought, okay, chemists can get jobs. So get a BS in chemistry. But I was always fascinated by interviews. I read the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson when I was 14 and sort of set me on a path so that when I was in college and I heard about environment, I went to go get a master's degree in that. Little known fact, in case you are thinking about graduate school, often if you go to graduate school in the sciences or engineering, you can go for free. So I got that degree and I went to Washington, D.C. to work in the Superfund program, cleaning up hazardous waste sites. I got tired of focusing on policy and wanted to actually do to the actual work. So I left the EPA and went to work in consulting on projects all over the country in cleaning up hazardous waste. And along the way, teaching on the side, first at Tufts University here in Massachusetts. All slowed way down when I got married and became a mom. Take different paths, but what was right for me and my family was to go to part-time work and still working as an engineer, but really taking on the unglamorous jobs with very little so that I could spend more time with my kids. I wanted to grow in my career. So in the first of the improbable events, cold called a publisher and sold a book on cleaning up hazardous. So while my kids were taking naps or later on when they were at dance classes or karate, I would sit there with a laptop and I wrote books, technical books. Had 5 published so far. So I think one of the first lessons I learned, you don't always have to do what's linear and expected. Interesting career. It was pretty unheard of at the time for a woman to continue to work as an engineer, to work as an engineer or to continue to work as an engineer after having children. And it was pretty unconventional part-time work and still maintain a career. But the door opened for me so as a writer and I walked through it. Working in that way for a while. And then the world kept changing. I'm happy to say that many hazardous waste sites were cleaned up. The environmental engineering in that space was leveling off. Was needed is people were becoming more and more aware of the risk associated with chemicals in the products that we all use every day or that industries use every day. And the field of product stewardship and product sustainability started to grow. I took the skills that I had learned as an environmental engineer, and I in that space, which, as I said a few minutes ago, is about bringing product safely, sustainably, and in compliance with global regulations. When my kids were in high school and I was looking at college tuition, like I ramped back up to full-time work. I also took on another gig adjunct professor teaching at Indiana University by Zoom. So this is a pretty familiar be talking to folks by Zoom. And fast forward to today, where I'm at the consulting firm ERM in Boston. And I also teach at University a class called Toxics in Consumer Products. So my work is focused around making it more sustainable. And it's my honor and privilege to teach how to do that as well. So some of this, lots of what you see on the screen is very old history and won't apply to your as you work your way through college and get out into the working world. There are some truisms, I think, that I suspect may apply to your career path. First thing I did was got a good basic training. I heard you talking about getting degrees in science and chemistry and maybe in engineering. Great to do a lot of different things with. Between that grounding, take some crazy risks like cold calling a publisher or walking into with a department head at a university. I've had a really interesting career. It's also let me live my values. I think our planet needs us. We need to make wiser decisions about using chemicals and how we dispose of them. So work in those areas, and I like to think it's helped to make a difference. I've managed to stay employed because I keep staying ahead of societal demands. So I went in hazardous waste cleanup when it was fairly new. And then I've evolved over the years as demand. And I think if you are looking for a stable career, if you want to be lucky like me, that's one way to do it. So I guess I will close my formal piece by saying we need you. I think when you talk about going into medicine or thinking about a career in civil engineering, those are all at some level passions to make the world a better place. So I hope you land up in a place that is interesting, gives you a long career, and helps you to serve. So there you go. That's my quick overview of environment and how I've made a career in it.
How did you discover environmental engineering? What was your getting?
So I went to college for chemistry at Indiana University, and I was working on undergraduate research in an analytical chemistry group that was analyzing pollution in the Great Lakes. And there was one professor in a different school who was an environmental engineer. And I just heard through the grapevine about it. And I went to go talk to him about it and did a little bit of reading. And then just jumped, just sort of took it on faith that this was going to be a good career. I didn't talk to anybody at the work, just jumped.
How would you say that environmental engineering differs from environmental science?
Yes. Environmental science is more generalized. When it comes to, so I work with environmentalists, and they may develop policies, they may evaluate environmental conditions, they may work on reporting and strategy, but the engineering degree allows you to do things like design solutions. So in hazardous waste, I was actually on design teams where we're designing pumps and piping to pump groundwater out of the ground and treat it in activated. Currently, I work with my clients' product design teams to work on remaking how they make products. Design background is helpful in talking with them. Gives me a little bit to the table in environmental science. So it all kind of depends on what you want to do. You like the way engineers think, because we think a little bit differently.
You want to publish more books?
I published 5 so far. Materials. Every single one has led to some more interesting work. They've even gotten me jobs a couple of times. During the pandemic, I wrote a novel. So I don't know if my next book is going to be another bad novel or it's going to be another.
You write under a pen name, or if we wanted to find one of your books, would it be under Kate Sellers?
It's Kathleen Sellers, and you can find them on Amazon.
So how would you suggest getting involved in research in college? Like where do you start?
Yeah. So different schools have a different emphasis on research. I went to schools that were universities that brought in a lot of research funding. Every school is set up that way. Some more liberal arts programs have research programs. But in both cases, I looked at the research that certain professors have websites where they talk about their research. I got into programs that allowed for undergraduates and then graduates to do research. And then I walked in and talked to professors, which is kind of funny because I'm a really shy person. So that was really hard for me. In the program I teach at the Harvard University Extension School, there's actually a capstone project that supports students in doing research or consulting to do some original problem solving. So a lot of programs are just built that way. Did that give you the information you were looking for?
I mean, like you just have to look for it, go find it, kind of.
Yeah. Yep. I think a lot of my career has been about seeing something interesting I wanted to do, momentarily getting over my shyness and going and asking somebody. And the trick is, if you ask somebody who is passionate about their work and you put the focus not on yourself, but on them and their work, and do they need help? A lot of people will have a good conversation and maybe even give you an opportunity.
Thank you.
So you have to find me in 3 years and tell me about the great research you're doing.
So if you're more interested in like the problem solving side of things, do you recommend engineering over science for environmental?
I would. I think it gives you a few more tools in the toolbox to be able to approach problem solving. In that said, environmental science is also a good degree. So I wouldn't want to say to anybody there's only one way to go about it.
For what you do now, do you also have to look at like not just like federal regulations with the US, do you also have to look globally too if they're like looking to push product?
Yep. So US companies usually sell their products globally. And I mostly work for multinational companies. So let me see if I can give you a list. Countries I have traveled to do work. UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Belgium, Finland, probably a couple of others because I'm doing this off the top of my head. Companies where I have done work with people, but I haven't traveled to. Thailand, China, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Taiwan. I don't know if I mentioned Taiwan, Singapore, South Africa, Mexico, Canada, Brazil. So yeah, we work globally. which is fun.
How often do you get to travel with your job?
Before the pandemic, a lot. Well, depends on the stage of my career. So before the pandemic, in this stage of my career, a couple times a month. Since the pandemic, it's gone way down. I do a lot of work on Zoom or Teams like this. When my kids were little, almost none at all. Again, choice about how I wanted to be with my kids. So for probably 10 years, I didn't travel hardly at all.
When you travel, what do you work on?
What do I work on? So it depends. I went to Finland a few years ago to meet with the European Commission to talk to them about authorizing the use of a chemical to make a drug that would save babies' lives. I kid you not. The chemical was highly toxic. And so we needed to assure the European Commission that it would be appropriately handled so it wouldn't cause any risks or be discharged to the environment. I went to Switzerland in 2019 to help to the headquarters of a multinational company that wanted to remake their design processes to make their products more sustainable. So it was a meeting of their lead scientists from around the world, and I was chairing meetings to talk about how to remake their design processes. So it's dependent. It usually is work that has been about bringing groups of people together to solve problems while jet lagged and slightly dehydrated from traveling.
Say that there's more opportunities for like environmental sciences and engineering in the European Union as opposed to the United States.
Wow, that's such a great question. The European Union has much more conservative laws and regulations in the product and space and the sustainability space. I'm not sure how they compare with respect to hazardous waste. But yeah, they've got a lot more emphasis on sustainability and products in EU than we do here. So are you thinking you'd like to have a career where you work around the world?
I like traveling, but I like science also, so I don't want to be a
Yep.
traveler.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
How does what you do now differ than when you were with the Environmental Protection Agency with the US?
Yeah. Well, first thing is that was 40 years ago. I'm now officially older than dirt. So 40 years ago, the Superfund program, which is the federal government's program for cleaning up hazardous waste sites, was only a few years old. And I worked in a group that helped to coordinate policy and responses to hazardous waste sites in the different parts of the country. So I was on a plane a lot, flying to Region 1 in Boston and Region 5 in Chicago, working to coordinate and work on the most precedential Superfund sites. So it was really of the time and of the place. And I think that even if that had been last year, with the new administration, the role of the Environmental Protection Agency will be changing a lot in the next couple of years. And then by the time you're out of school, it will have changed again.
So did you like work with like cleaning up rivers between like different states with hazardous waste then?
Some of the sites I worked on were sites where pollution had come from land-based facilities and gotten into rivers or streams. I worked on one, for example, where there was coal tar and coal oil. I worked on a couple, all through the sediments. And in a couple of those, there were endangered species in the water. So we had to figure out how to clean up or cap those wastes without causing harm to endangered species. I think that's the other thing that's cool about environmental engineering and environmental science as well, is the problems are multidimensional. It's not just trying to deal with the coal tar and coal oil in the sediment. It's how do you do that when you're working around tidal fluctuations, or how do you do that when there's an endangered species present, or an apartment building right up on the top of the hill and you can't make things smell because, you know, there's people right there living there. So it requires a lot of different ways of looking at a problem and sort of juggling and balancing a lot of different considerations. So never dull, never ever dull. Sometimes frustrating, never dull.
What would you say your favorite like chapter of your career has been?
Wow. I think right now I am doing some of the best work of my career, and I really love teaching. I'm getting ready to teach January semester, so I teach one semester a year. And this time of year, I'm a nerd. So I'm a little bit like a kid at Christmas, like, ooh, I get to start thinking about teaching and how I'm going to teach this semester and what new things I'm going to bring to the class. So this is a good chapter, but they've all been good chapters. I've learned something and made good friends in every single chapter along the way, and supported my kids, paid off a mortgage, all that practical stuff.
What is your least favorite?
I caught what is your least favorite, and then I lost the rest of the question. What was
Job of your career?
least favorite?
Part of your career.
Least favorite. Every single job I've ever had, except maybe teaching, because I just do that as an adjunct, has had politics and paperwork, just stuff that goes along with working anywhere. And I promise you, you will find it anywhere that is not central to the core work. That can get a little frustrating.
How involved are politics with your work? Like, how much do they bother you? Like, I mean, like, how much are politicians like, we have this and that policy?
Again, I'm not speaking on behalf of any of my employers, past or present. I think that there's a couple of levels of it. There's just normal, anywhere you work, there's office politics and office policies, and you have to learn to let those roll off your back as best you can. Otherwise, they will make you crazy. Unless and until there gets to be a point where you think that they're unethical, or just you have to walk away and then you go find another job. The kind of work that environmental engineers do, we also run into larger political forces. So I've had to stand up at public meetings, you know, telling people this is how we're going to clean up the hazardous waste site that's down the street from your house, and had people scream at me, you know, you're killing my children. We don't like what you're doing. How dare you say that? You've sold out to industry. I've heard that one before. And again, you just sort of have to take it as that's their point of view. Take a deep breath and roll on. So I think anywhere you work, no matter what it is you do, come back to me in 10 years and tell me if I'm wrong. You're going to run into politics of one kind or another. And I will love it, by the way, if you come back to me in 10 years and go, hey, Kate, you were wrong.
How did you overcome barriers?
I would say one of the biggest barriers I've met with throughout my career is sexism. I don't know the exact numbers, but women in engineering is only between 10 and 15% of the profession. And as I've already acknowledged, I'm older than dirt. So there were not a lot of women in engineering or part-time mothers in engineering. Still aren't. And I think I've gotten through it by, first of all, I'm stubborn. And second, I've had really good friends and mentors. And third, I just refuse to take in that assumption by many people I have worked with and continue to work with that women are inferior. I just don't buy the premise. I think it's getting better, and I hope that for you guys, it's a whole lot better. So I would say that's consistently through my career, the barrier that has been most present. Beyond that, just my own limitations. And those I work on.
Have you used your chemistry degree a lot with this, like environmental engineering?
Yeah, I do. Because I've chosen the branch of environmental engineering that I work in has had to do with chemicals at hazardous waste sites, chemicals in land and water or sediment, or now it's chemicals in products. I confess I no longer remember the Schrodinger wave equation in quantum mechanics. Please don't ask me to derive from first principles chemical synthesis. Like those details are gone, but I use the basic training that I get in chemistry. So I think, were you the one that was talking about getting a degree in chemistry? Somebody mentioned it. Yeah. It's a great, basic degree that you can do a lot of different things with.
Looking back, and I don't know if Indiana had an environmental engineering program when you went there, but do you wish you had gotten a degree in that? Or
they didn't have it, and by the time I graduated in 1981, and by the time I graduated in 1981, there were 35 schools in the country that offered environmental engineering degrees, mostly, if memory serves, at the master's level. So it wasn't that common of a degree. So I don't regret my path at all. I've zigzagged a lot over the years, and I don't regret it, any of it.
How did Carroll prepare you for the future? Did I take your?
Oh, okay. I was lucky to have some really good teachers. Mr. Sens, who went on to become principal at Carroll, was a chemistry teacher who really challenged us in a way that few other teachers or classes had, and just intrigued me. Sister Pascaline taught math, but what she really taught was how do you break down a problem and solve it. So actually, I owe her a debt, because on the professional engineering exam, there was a problem on surveying. I'd never taken a survey class in my life, but thanks to Sister Pascaline, I could solve it, all those years later. Mr. Forthover, may he rest in peace, taught us all how to write. I've published 5 books. I don't have an English degree. I took 1 semester of English in college, but he taught me how to write. So I would say that's what I largely brought with me. There's probably some other things too, but that was my starting point. Do I have suggestions on finding the right school? It's funny you asked that, because I stumbled my way through that question myself. I also went through it. I have 2 daughters who are now 28 and 30. So I went through it with them. My first big, and if I had neon lights to flash on the board, I would say minimize debt. Do what you can so that you don't go deeply in debt for college, because that'll hang around your neck like an anchor and weigh you down as you get out of school and go into the working world. So as you're thinking about college, that would be one piece of advice I'd have, is think about what you can realistically afford without going deep into debt. I tend to have a bias toward schools that offer a bunch of different programs, just in case you don't know exactly what you want to do when you go into school, because then you have a chance to kind of look around and meet different people, be exposed to different things, figure out what you want to do. For my two daughters, another important piece, because they both kind of knew what they wanted to do, but another important piece was setting. So I have one daughter who lights up and always has whenever she was in a city. So for her, we focused on looking at schools in cities. She ended up going to Northeastern in Boston and NYU, New York University, for grad school. My other daughter can't stand cities. We were looking at and was interested in animals, animal science. So we looked at land grant universities with bigger campuses and more room to spread out. So I guess that's my own idiosyncratic sort of take on thinking about schools. I'm curious, what kind of advice have you guys been hearing about looking for schools? Did what I say resonate with you at all?
The minimize debt.
Minimize debt.
Minimize debt, yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been looking at like out of state versus in-state tuition, and it's
that when they search for a job, does it matter if they go to Wright State or Harvard? Like, do you think that really has that big of an impact when looking for a job? Especially the first job, I should say.
The first job. So I'm going to be really flippant, and I'm going to give you the flippant answer first, which is I'm very proud of my state school degrees, right? Indiana University, University of Massachusetts. And early in my career, I had some people make fun of me because I didn't have an Ivy League degree, but I teach at Harvard. My books are in the libraries of Ivy League schools around the country. So that's my flippant answer. I think that there will always be some hiring managers and some positions who will look for the pedigree, right? If you want to become a Supreme Court justice, yeah, go to Harvard Law School, not law school at Indiana University, because the path is shorter. But I think if you have a good academic background, if you show an interviewer that you can think, you can get all kinds of interesting work, steady work, reliable work, well-paying work without an Ivy League degree. No doubt about it.
So can you get a degree in engineering without having an undergrad? Like like you got your master's in engineering without.
I did. So my undergraduate degree is in chemistry, and then I switched to engineering. And UMass paid for my tuition and paid me a stipend. So I was 20 years old and off my parents' dole at that point and supporting myself. But I had to take enough undergraduate classes in engineering to sort of make up the gap. So I have like 3/4 of a chemical engineering degree from classes that I took while I was getting my master's degree. So it can be done. It can be done. Well, I hope each of you has a career that is as interesting and steady as mine has been. Thank you for taking the time today to talk with me. And if you have any follow-up questions, Julie knows how to get a hold of me.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.